My name is Harvey. I'm a wedding photographer in the UK. I used to be a graphic designer for about 8 years, and before that I was studying for a master's degree in advanced computer science, so I have both sort of technical and geeky backgrounds along with the creative stuff. My work is very much orientated around sort of creativity, geometry and composition. Being emotive and capturing emotion is obviously very important, but I try to do that within artistic realms, which is always a good challenge for me. It's proved very, very sort of successful for me, to use a term. Last year and the year before, I won the Best Wedding Photographer in England from the Wedding Industry Awards. And this year I'm currently at the top of the UK Fearless Photographers Award list, so it's going well. But awards are very useful and they're good for, marketing and website and stuff and helping couples trust you. But it's not really about that. It's about what you offer people. And something that I always endeavour to do is to offer the best I can for the couples I shoot for. I never call them clients. I always call them couples. While I shoot creatively, my goal is to give them something they're going to love forever. So it's kind of a spiritual job for me as well as a creative one. It's something that I get value from giving to other people as well. I feel very lucky to be doing it. Even though I loved the job before, being a graphic designer and usability consultant, it's something I've sort of fallen into and fallen in love with, really.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Yeah, that's very interesting. How you've gone from design to photography. Obviously, both creative fields, and you probably had used your expertise now that you learnt in design school or whatever that was. Can you just give us a brief rundown on how you actually got into wedding photography, please?
Yes, this will be quite a short one because I have no idea. My sort of wife and I, Holly, we often say, how on earth did this happen? Because I picked up a camera in 2005 for the first time, and I bought myself a little Canon 350D and a 50mm 1.8, or the Nifty 50. And I just totally fell in love with it. And while I was designing and working for quite sort of big clients, my heart was in photography, and I was doing what most people do. I was taking pictures of animals, flowers, the sort. And in 2009, it was Christmas, and my father brought me a gift, which was this one present. And there was a little note on it which said, follow your dreams. And I opened up and it was a D700. And obviously I beamed from ear to ear because the D700 is an awesome camera. And then he went away and he brought back 2 more loads of presents, and it ended up being like a 24-70, 70-200, a couple of SB900s, and the 85 1.4.
Wow, sounds like the best dad ever.
I know, tell me about it. It's amazing, and I'm forever thanking him for it. And I like to tell this story because it's very important to me, because he is the reason I am where I am, his generosity. So if I ever become a father, the thing I will do, I will learn from him, and I'll give them everything I can to help them do what they love, because doing what you love not only enriches your life, it enriches other people's lives. And from that point, I used to want to be a fashion photographer. So I sort of started doing model tests and all that stuff. And someone just asked me to shoot their wedding. And because I was very confident with my gear and I'd shot social events before, I said yes, and I gave them ample warning as such that I hadn't shot a wedding before, and this would be the first time, but they were cool with it. I think I charged them £200 at the time, so it wasn't exactly a massive investment. I never second shot for anyone. I just went in heads first after doing a lot of research and looking for a lot of inspiration. And it went incredibly well, and from that point their friends asked me, and it just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed until I think it was 2010. I left my job and went full-time in photography, and it's been, nearly 4 years since then, 3.75. So it's gone very quickly for me to get where I am today.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's an interesting story, and once again, your dad, what an amazing dad, and what great taste in cameras as well. I think that was that's how I started off wedding photography. D700, 24-70, Nifty 50, pretty much all you need to get going, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Okay.
It's fantastic. It didn't take me long to get over zooms, though.
To get over zooms, yeah, I'll come to that later. So yeah, that leads us on nicely actually into your kit, which is obviously the main reason for Shotkit. You said before that you're a bit of a gear geek, to want of a better word, but you're obviously very much into your equipment. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you. Obviously, you're a great photographer. On top of that, you're very open about sharing your kit, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm sure a lot of the people who read Shotkit are very interested in your lineup. We'll go into that a bit later about the Nikon and Canon split. But if you'd just like to maybe start us off, I'm going to run down what cameras you use, and then if you could just say just a couple of words on why you made that choice, I think that would be quite interesting.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to show the photo of your camera gear to the viewers at home. From the top left, I think we've got there, let me see, that's a D4. So not that that needs any introduction, but why did you choose that? There we go.
It's actually a D3S.
Oh, it's a D3S, I apologise.
But yeah, I used a couple of D3Ss. Well, before I went to the D700, my dad had actually seen me choose between a 5D2 and a D3, D700 quite a lot. I spent a lot of effort looking at it. And what sold me was the fact the D700 had the AF and the sensor from the D3 flagship model, whereas the 5D2 was far off, and everybody knows the 5D2's autofocus was absolutely dire, which is why there's a lot of back button focus and recompose photographers, because they couldn't use AF on 5D2. And so obviously I was invested in Nikon at that point. And I did actually have a D3, and because it was the same sensor, it didn't really feel that much of an upgrade. And the second I bought the D3, the D3S was announced, which was exceedingly annoying. And I bought that, and the AF on it was just absolutely insane. And the dynamic range at high ISOs is incomparable. It was at the time. It was leaps ahead of what Canon offered. And I still use it today.
Okay.
And unless the D4S is significantly better, I'll stick with these D3Ss for a long time, because I think they're the perfect wedding camera. They're not actually that much bigger and heavier than a Mark III, and yet you can get one for the same price, really. So it's a no-brainer for me.
Okay, great. Just for those who perhaps don't shoot Nikon, or a beginner coming into photography, just to give them a brief idea, D700, it's a great full-frame camera. They're getting cheaper now. Obviously, I think they're about 7 years old, so quite old for a camera. Still an awesome camera, and many of the top wedding photographers still use them. You said that you had one. You've chosen to go for a D3 that you said that has is it the same sensor? Am I right?
It's the same sensor in the D3. The D3S is a different sensor.
Right, okay. So the D3 has the same sensor. D3S has a different sensor. Did you feel that was that an essential move for you to make? Obviously, you've got the higher frame rate, and it's a more robust body, more shutter actuations, etc., etc. Do you think that's actually necessary for a wedding photographer, or is that just a luxury that you like?
It's a luxury that I like. You've hit the nail on the head. The reason is I don't like to have gear that limits me in any way. And if I miss a shot because my camera can't shoot fast enough, I will think I need a camera that can shoot fast enough. Having dual card slots is obviously a massive relief, because you've got instant backup when you shoot, especially if you shoot raw and you duplicate them. I find with the D3S, I tend to work really quickly. When I'm doing portraits, I work really quickly. When I'm doing photojournalism, I work really quickly. With that camera, I can nip in and nip out and take the picture, and it's nearly always in focus. I never really miss anything. And if you shoot in bursts of 2 or 3 shots, you'll also avoid the funny faces someone may pull when they're speaking, or the odd blink, because you get the odd picture of a beautiful picture and someone's doing this.
Yeah.
Because they're in the middle of saying something. You think, no! The D3S, because you can just go bang, 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 it completely stops that, which is another reason I think they're wonderful.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good point. Most people think frames per second, it must be for a sports photographer who needs to shoot 10 frames and catch all the action. But yeah, like you just said, expressions change very quickly, and yeah, that's a great reason. Yeah, very great. It's a great reason to use something like that. Okay, if we move around the photo towards the bottom, so we've got a film camera, Leica M3.
I'm a bit of a nerd. I've actually surrounded myself with cameras.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Yeah, it saves me having to refer to the photo each time. So yeah, obviously Leica, even if you know nothing about cameras, is synonymous for the best rangefinder in the world. Why, first of all, did you choose a Leica, if I need to ask that? And also, do you use it in your wedding photography?
The Leica is an addition this year, and it happened after I met some wonderful people at the Boda F conference in Spain, which I was giving a talk at. it was Tanya Lippert and Ryan Muirhead, and specifically Ryan, you had this camera. And I had an M6 previously at the end of last year. I didn't fall in love with it. It still felt too new, because the Leica has that heritage, and this M3 is an engineered piece of brass. It's absolutely beautiful to hold and use. And the second I held it, I fell in love. And so I thought to myself, I'm going to try this, because film is very different. It forces you to think and compose. You know, you don't crop the same way. And it adds more to your game, I think. It makes you think. And I know a lot of film shooters say that, but it's actually very true, especially for someone like me, who I don't spray and pray at all. I just shoot a lot to make sure I have the right expressions. It means you can't do that. You have to sort of wait for the blink and shoot just after that and stuff like that. So it adds another dimension to your photography, I think.
Yeah.
Plus, you learn to meter in your head as well, rather than just a camera.
Yeah, that's great. It must be a bit mind-boggling for you to go from a machine gun, the D3S, to something slow and something deliberate like the Leica M3. Do you find that switch difficult, or you actually thrive on that change?
The latter, yeah. I found it exceedingly empowering, believe it or not, because you can use each other one to enforce the other, and it teaches you even more how to shoot with different cameras and different gear and get the best of what you have. I actually used this Leica at the last wedding I shot, a few bridal portraits at prep, so I'm looking forward to getting the role that's still in it developed.
Okay, yeah, there's always the excitement of shooting film, not quite knowing what you've got. And what's that strap that you have on there? I like that leather. It's
a very popular strap. It's the Gaudy strap from the States.
Okay.
They're absolutely wonderful. I fell in love with it straight away. It's exceedingly supple, very tough. They've got a massive reputation, and it's obvious to see why. If I ever get another Leica, I'll put another Gaudy strap on.
Oh, okay, there you go. Great compliment for the Leica as well. It looks good on there.
It looks perfect in silver, yeah.
Okay, so right, the next one in your arsenal is the Olympus. So I'm going to let you do most of the talking about this camera. I'm not so familiar with it. I know it's very popular, so that's the OMD-EM5, I think. So just, yeah, a few words on that camera and why you chose it.
Sure. First off, I think Olympus should actually owe me commission on this camera, because I've probably sold a fleet of them after people seeing them. I used to have an X100, an X100S, and the slow AF just killed me, because I've been spoiled by the D3S, of course. But this little beast, it focuses just as fast as the D3S. It has a 2x crop factor sensor, so obviously I'm shooting 17mm to get 34, which is close to 35mm equivalent on a full frame. And it actually gives you a larger depth of field because it's a 2x crop factor. So for things like street photography and candid photography, it's brilliant, because you can use the faster shutter speeds at low apertures like f2, and you're actually getting an aperture which is more like 2.8 or f4. So if you're shooting at f5.6, it's equivalent to like f8 or something. I don't know the exact maths, but it's an absolutely wonderful camera. It's the EVF on it is exceedingly quick. You can have live dynamic updates of highlights and shadows that are blown on the back screen. And like I said, the focus is crazy. And plus, you can actually touch the screen.
Wow.
I'll see if I can show you briefly.
Yeah.
If I focus on something like this bush, and I'm going to try and get the camera in the... You have to bear with me here. That's pointing straight at the ceiling, sorry. You can touch. Oh, I've disabled touchscreen. I will enable touchscreen and not look like I know what I'm doing.
Oh, wow.
There we go.
That's incredible.
And if I touch it, it will literally... Can you hear it taking a picture?
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And you can sort of walk up to someone, hold the top of the camera as if you're adjusting it, just tap the back screen and it takes a picture.
Sneaky, I like it.
So for street photography, it's amazing. And I've just arrived this morning. It's something that I'm going to be testing it against, which is the Fuji X-T1. This has got the 23mm 1.4 mounted on it.
Very nice.
It's a lot bigger, but the image quality will be a lot better. So I'll be looking forward to giving that a test and see if I keep it or not.
Okay. So you mentioned you use that Olympus for street photography. You can do that subtle touchscreen thing at the back there. Is that the reason that you've blacked out? Am I right in thinking you blacked out the Olympus on the top there, or is that how it comes?
Yes, I did. You're right. The lens has been blacked out, even though I've got a silver lens because you couldn't buy black at the time.
Yeah.
I've just got rid of the text. And also, if you're in a country where money is tight as such, having fancy looking gear can actually make you a bit of a target. So it's good to just rough up your gear a bit. And blacking stuff out is actually a very good tip for that. And using a bag which looks like it's been destroyed.
Yeah, no, I like it. Very stealth. Looks cool.
Mm.
Yeah, it's amazing the advancements in these. I'm not sure if I'd call it a point and shoot, but the smaller cameras. It almost makes the DSLRs look a little bit dated. There's not actually that big advancements from year to year. It seems like they're getting quicker, maybe a few more megapixels, but nothing game-changing like the LCD screen that you just showed me, or some of the things that the other camera manufacturers are doing. It seems like Nikon and Canon are dragging their heels a bit, and Sony and some of the other makers. What do you think? They're coming up from behind and they're going to take over the market, perhaps?
I think Nikon and Canon very much need to start making mirrorless small cameras if they want to compete, because at the moment they have their limitations. Like the Olympus, as good as it is, has nowhere near the dynamic range of the D3S. The Sony A7 and the A7R, they make sensors for Nikon, which is why the sensors in the A7s are so wonderful, is because they've already been touted as brilliant in the D800 and the D610. Nikon are very clever in that respect, so I'm hoping that they're going to use Sony sensors and put their own small body with their brilliant AF on top of it. Because if you took this Olympus and you put a Sony sensor in it, and it would just be the best camera in the universe, and I've used 2 of them for my wedding photography.
There you go, Olympus. I hope you're listening.
Yes, it's also got incredible image stabilization in body, which means that you can handhold a shot that takes a second, and it'll still come out sharp. It's absolutely insane, the technology in that little camera.
That's incredible. See, there again, if I use that next to my DSLR, I'd think that I had the same ability and I'd have all blurred shots.
You would. Saying that, I do absolutely love the D3S. It's been in my workhorse for years, and it's my favourite camera. But like you say, the technology is changing so fast. It's the full frame, more small cameras that will take over. And DSLRs will be a thing of the past in maybe 4 years, I think.
Right, yeah, that's good. That's an interesting prediction. Yeah, that's very interesting to hear about the Olympus and thoughts about that. There's one of the reasons that I started Shotkit, obviously, is to talk about gear and everything, and we all have gear envy. One way or another, we like showing off our kit, I think, and that sounds kind of dodgy, doesn't it? But yeah, showing off our camera gear. And and it's almost a little bit annoying for me because I see all this amazing camera gear, and here I've just learned more about the Olympus, and I actually own the Fuji X100S, me and 1,000 other people, 100,000 other people, but obviously the autofocus is the massive area where that camera's lacking. Probably the only area, actually. I love it in every other respect, but now you've just mentioned the autofocus on the Olympus. Yeah, now I'm thinking, that sounds good as well. So there you go. It's the endless cycle of gear envy and buying gear that you don't need, etc., etc. So if I move on a bit further to the final camera that I think that you've got in the photo, and this is the controversial point. So we're swapping here from the Nikon DSLR to the Canon. So the Canon 5D Mark III, I could probably say it's the most popular DSLR ever. I don't know, do you think I'm safe in saying that? Definitely the most popular one for wedding photographers, and I'm sure that's replicated over all the genres. So rather than you telling me why you've got a 5D Mark III, can you tell me why you're using it beside these amazing Nikons?
It's for this lens. It's for the 50L. It has a specific kind of flare that you can't get in any Nikon lens. If you could, I wouldn't have that camera. I think it's because of the very wide aperture at 1.2. And the Canon sensor actually renders more detail if you're backlit against a strong light source from my own testing. I'm not saying that's scientific. When I was doing sunset backlit shots, the shots with the D3 and the Canon Mark III, the D3S and the Mark III, the Mark III would have more detail in the shot, more contrast and micro contrast if the sun was actually quite glaring. Combine that with the flare, and I use that camera probably about 2% of a wedding, maybe 1%. If there's a sunset, I'll be out with that camera. If there isn't, it won't leave the bag.
Amazing.
Well, you have to have the tools that allow you to get what you want, and I don't like being limited by gear, like I said, and it pays for itself because they're often the couple's favourite portraits, those sunset shots.
definitely. So,
Yeah, that's how the rules.
so in your own usage, you've found that there's more dynamic range in the 5D Mark III files than in the D3S files.
Only when it's backlit by a strong light source like the sun.
Interesting.
If I did testing with normal light and shadow and highlight, sorry, I took the same shot during preps of a bride, a silhouette of a bride having her makeup done. D3S and 5D3, and I edited the same files exactly the same and pushed them, the shadows, and the files from the D3S absolutely destroy the 5D3 in terms of dynamic range and quality of noise. The noise in the 5D3 is very chromatic. It has banding, and the chromatic noise is horrible because you can't really fix it in post because it's blotchy, even if it's black and white. Whereas the D3S, the grain is very subtle, and it even looks a little bit like film grain. So there is no comparison with the dynamic range between the D3S and the 5D3. The D3S wins hands down, unless you're shooting into the sun.
Yeah, that's great. I think hundreds of thousands of Canon users around the world are going to be hitting the stop button right about now. Don't think they'd like to hear that about their beloved cameras.
I know.
Yeah.
You generally find that people who use Nikon have shot Canon. This is a general statement. It's by no means omnipotent. And people who use Canon haven't shot Nikon. The choice was back in the days of it was D700 versus the 5D Mark II. That was basically the big full frame battle between cameras. A lot of people went for the bigger megapixels of the 5D2, which is why it's the most used camera in stock photography. But bigger megapixels doesn't necessarily mean better, because I've printed massive files from the D700, massive photos, and they look wonderful. Can you tell that I'm a big fan of Nikon?
Don't worry, mate. I am as well. So you're talking to the right person. And I love hearing about this because, like you said, that's actually true. Now you mention it, that most Nikon users have used the Canon, but vice versa, it doesn't seem to be true. It seems like Canon users know, or think at least, that they're best and they don't need to try anything else. Anyway, I don't want to get too much into that because I know that the Nikon Canon thing is just everlasting, and there's no best camera out there. Like you said, it's best for the individual, but it's just very interesting to know why you're using both, and you're using perhaps the highlight ability, or at least when it's a backlit shot, the dynamic range within the highlights of the Canon, and then you're using the Nikon because of perhaps superior autofocus and the shadow renditioning and the data in the shadows. Yes. Okay. So there was one other thing that I was going to mention about the Canon. It's just slipped my mind. Anyway, I'm a Nikon user, and I've used the Canon. Great camera. The only thing that kept me with Nikon, believe it or not, was the joystick. I didn't like the joystick. That was the one thing. And on the Nikon, obviously, you've got that joypad, and it just fits my big thumb. I just couldn't get the hang of that little thing.
I don't like the joystick either. I mean, I've got two friends, and the little joystick on the 5D3 has come off.
Oh.
And mine actually came off at the end, but I managed to stick it back in. So they're not very good on the Mark IIIs.
All right, moving swiftly on before we get some hate mail. All right, so we'll come to your lenses in a second. There's something very interesting in the corner of your photo that I'm sure that a lot of people want to know about. I spoke to Sam Hurd, who's another great wedding photographer, a couple of weeks ago. He uses the prisming technique. I know he's not the pioneer, and perhaps neither are you. It's been around for decades. I'm sure they use them in film cameras, so and so on. You have a purple, what looks like a jewel there. I don't even know what better to describe that. Could you tell us a bit about, first of all, I'd love to know where you got it from, if you're allowed to share that secret, and also how you use it.
It's I don't have it with me at the moment. It's a glass pyramid that has a coloured base, which causes you can use different colours in the shots. I found that originally I had a clear one, which is great, but everybody else started using clear ones, so I wanted to add colour to it. That's also linked to my graphic design days. I like to mix up and put a lot of colour in my photography. And so a coloured prism can add another dimension to a photo. It's as simple as that. And I use it a lot less now because prisming has become a lot more common. And I try and do things that aren't as common, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I still do it, but I do it a lot less than I used to. I only do it in certain environments. But I'll use anything. I mean, I was actually using I just happened to have a spoon here, by the way. That wasn't for example. I was using a spoon to get some nice highlights for a bridal prep shot, which is one of my favourites. You could use literally anything reflective, and you have something to shoot to and add another depth to your image.
That's awesome. Gives a whole new meaning to spooning. Anyway.
There is no spoon.
And where did you pick up that little pyramid thing?
It was actually handed down by my grandfather. Unfortunately, so I couldn't give you a shop to go and buy it. But if you just search on eBay for like glass pyramid or crystal pyramid and put coloured or something in, you might be able to find something.
Okay, great. So you were mentioning before about how you wish to differentiate your photo. I think everyone, when they come to get to your level, obviously there's hundreds, probably thousands of amazing photographers that are at your level. You have to differentiate yourself. You have to show the client that you offer something different to the next photographer. Looking through your photos, something that struck me was how clear and how sharp they were. This is aside from the everything creative that you do, which is just astonishing. But those two elements really struck me, especially in your portfolio work that you supplied to Shotkit. It looks incredibly sharp, almost like it being drawn, with a pen or something. Can you describe just briefly, maybe go into your post-processing workflow, just to give, obviously you don't want to share too many of your secrets, but just as many as you can.
I get a lot of comments about that actually, is the cleanliness and sharpness. And people often ask me, how do you get it looking so sharp? And the first one is obviously AF. You want to be able to nail the shots. That is the primacy of having a sharp shot, is nailing AF. Other than that, I don't use anything magical at all. I do reasonable sharpening in Lightroom, because I do 3 runs on my post-processing, 2 in Lightroom, 1 in Photoshop. The first one is, adjusting the crop, getting the colours and the white balance exactly how I like it. So I'll edit the picture to how I think is right. But if you do that once, if you look back over your work, you'll notice, because you've worked from a base perhaps where the white balance is way off, your correction might be off by a millimetre, and you haven't noticed it because you've come from such a vast degree of difference. So I'll put it into grid mode, Lightroom, and you can look at photographs in obviously a film strip as such, and you can see if the white balance is even slightly on them. So I go through a second time and just make sure the white balance between the whole set is consistent. And I export them, like I said, using Lightroom. And to be clear, a very important thing you can learn about Lightroom is the inbuilt sharpening is pretty rubbish. So here's a bit of a tip, actually. It's not a secret, but not many people know of it. If you go to, I think it might be photographerstoolbox.com, there's a guy who does a lot of Lightroom plugins, and one of them is called Mogrify. Mogrify is usually considered one for watermarking, but there's a little gem in it. It's actually got an unsharp mask in it, just like Photoshop, and I use that rather than the Photoshop sharpening. So I use an unsharp mask in Lightroom for my export, but very minimal because it's a very strong mask. And then I run through Photoshop, and that's what I call the cleaning phase. I spend a lot of time, obviously I'll do it in camera, we all do it. If there's a fire hydrant, you'll move to the side to get rid of it. Sometimes you can't get rid of things. If you're capturing a shot in the moment and it's pure documentary, you make sure you have to get that moment. And I will move stuff from the background to make sure that my shots are clear and consistent. Because consistency of cleanliness in a portfolio will give the viewer the feeling of cleanliness and space. Excuse me. Which is exactly what you want to give them. Because when people look at your work, it will invoke feelings within them, and the way that you tailor your work should be optimized for how the viewer feels. And I spend a lot of time making things clear, and it does take a lot of effort. I went through a stage of being, oh yes, I can process my wedding in 2 hours. Wow, wonderful, I'm very talented at that. And I realized that the more effort I put in, actually, the better it would look and the more I was giving to my couple. So over time, my processing has got longer and longer. I'm actually more proud of that now because I'm putting in more for the couple rather than just making sure I can edit quickly. I mean, when I edited quickly, I obviously did it as well as I could, but now I spend a lot more time on the finer details. And I think that has to happen when you sort of go up through the ranks of pricing as such, and the people who book you. You have to contain a very high level of consistency.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting.
There's one other thing.
Sorry?
Sorry to interrupt you there, Mark. An important fact is when I export through Photoshop for my final export for the web, I use something called a better web sharpen, which is an action within the totally rad actions, I think. And that is a very good web sharpening action.
Okay, so you're sharpening once in Lightroom with Mogrify, and then again when you're uploading to web with the, sorry, what was the name of the tool?
A better web sharpen with a totally rad action.
Okay, so lots of sharpening, and that's why they're so sharp.
Yes, but the sharpening from Lightroom is actually very minimal. It's very minimal indeed, because I export all my high-res stuff through Photoshop as well, and I use the normal unsharp mask for that. So there's not loads of sharpening, because you'll get halos and compression, which doesn't look good. It's just you have to find that balance. And the only way you can do it is to test and test and test and test, and that's what I did. Yeah. I found all the variables to make the picture look sharp without it looking overdone.
Yeah, that's great. Obviously, people who are watching this are going to be well-established photographers, all the way down to noobs who've had no experience whatsoever. Yeah, sorry, newcomers. Sounds like I'm a geek now. Yeah, so obviously people are going to be watching this and thinking, oh wow, Ross applies a ton of sharpening and then he does it again, and they're going to have these really crunchy files. But like you just said there, you've done this because you've tried and tested it, and the proof's in the pudding. Your photos, obviously they don't look crunchy, they just look very clear. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you don't know much about post-processing, then just have a play around with the settings, and Lightroom's great for that. It's just a slider. You don't need anything technical, and I'm sure that you'll find your own post-processing style. So just quickly, Ross, you touched on your post-processing getting longer and longer. On an average wedding, how long do you post-process for?
I get asked that question a lot, and it's very variable, but I would say around a full day's work, and a full day meaning self-employed, like 12, 14 hours now. Okay. Maybe 9 to 10, but I tend to do it in batches. I won't hammer it all in one day. I'll spread it out to make sure that my mind is nice and fresh, rather than just drill myself through it, which is what I used to do. Okay, great. So you're shooting a 12-hour wedding, and then you're backing that up with around 12 hours of post-processing. May I ask roughly how many photos you shoot at a wedding and how many you deliver to the client? If this is getting a bit too close to your secrets, then just feel free to say pass. But no, not at all. Not at all. If you work from an air of secrecy, you'll just compound yourself. The more you give, the more you have to push yourself to be different. So I don't mind sharing anything.
Thanks very much.
I shoot on average a 14-hour wedding, and I'll shoot between 3,500 and 4,500 images. I'd say my average is about 4.2. And if you remember with the D3S, I burst shoot to make sure I have the right moment. So it's not as many as people think, because I'm bang, bang, bang. It's essentially 2 or 3 shots per shot I'm trying to take. So you can literally half or even third that figure into the shots that I've composed and I really want. It's just a point of making sure that you're in the right place at the right time. And the couple will usually get around 500 fully edited photographs from me. And they're a mix of black and white. Some people supply both. I supply whatever I'm taking, because a lot of the time I'm shooting for either colour or black and white specifically. And sometimes, as you know, if the light is really bad, you can save a picture with black and white, so you wouldn't want to supply that in colour anyway.
Okay,
but that's
great.
More rare.
Yeah, great. Thanks for answering that. Very interesting for everyone to hear, I'm sure. I'm just going to put another picture on the screen, one that you supplied to us. You won't be able to see it, so I'm going to have to describe it to you. But it's a street photography shot where you've used a silhouette of a man smoking a cigarette and reading a newspaper. I absolutely love this shot. Could you answer perhaps first of all, what gear you used to take this picture?
All of the street photography stuff you see is the OMD-EM5. To me, it's the perfect street photography camera. Stealth, quiet, and fantastically capable. That's one of my favourite pictures I've ever taken, actually, along with the other shot on your site of the hatted silhouette guy.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm very much playing with including silhouettes and fully lit people in the same image, combining the shadows and the highlights. And you just have to position yourself where you can have the subject either in light or in shadow, and the background elements the opposite. And that particular shot I was exposing for the highlights because I noticed that his magazine was completely bright in the sun, or the diffused sun, because it's actually through a mist. And he was just half sort of in a shaded area. I have dropped the shadows on him a bit. He wasn't completely black. I post-processed it a tiny bit to drop him a bit more. But the glint on his glasses was completely natural. I boosted it by about 15% in post and dropped his shadows by about 15%. So the picture was already there in the camera. I've just edited to make it a bit more mysterious. And I like to do things like that because, as you can see, the glasses stand out almost as if they've been stuck on a graphic design element. And that's the kind of thing I'm really enjoying at the moment.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like a composite almost. You've got each person doing something that looks like they're acting a scene. It's brilliant. So you use the Olympus there, and then is it the Olympus? You've got the 35mm on there, which is...
Yes. Oh, actually, that may have been the 25mm Panasonic Leica, which is actually 50mm on the OMD.
Okay.
In fact, it was the 50mm.
Okay, and this was a super sunny day, so were you around f11? Or?
No, that was actually sun coming through mist at that point, but it was over a building, so there was a weird shadow going on.
Okay.
It was probably f5.6, I would imagine. That's my go-to aperture for that camera because of the smaller crop factor and the larger depth of field. Okay,
yeah, it's awesome. I love how the magazine is so sharp as well. It's almost, like I said before, a composite. It's brilliant.
It was reflecting the sun, which is obviously why if you're exposed for the highlights, you can drop everything else.
Yeah, that's great. Is street photography something that you do just as a hobby, or is it something that you're trying to try and build a name for as well?
It's something I'm doing as a hobby, but I never make plans. I never limit myself to anything. I mean, that was taken on a trip with 7 other photographers who are very good friends. We formed a little collective called the 8th Street, which because there was 8 of us in street photography. Very, very clever title there. We're launching a website soon, but we're off to Istanbul this year as well to have a session. We all just love it. You know, we're all wedding photographers, but we love street photography. We just think it's very empowering and I don't know, it's just so true and genuine. Nothing is phased at all, nothing is organised. You just have to go and capture these moments. So I love people like, you know, Trent Park, Alex Webb, all the big names, HCB, of course. Henry Cartier-Bresson, by the way, if anyone doesn't know who HCB is.
Thanks for clearing that up.
It's just something that I love to do. If I can push it a bit further, I will, because I'm always about pushing myself. Whenever I look at I'll shoot a wedding and I'll look back at my work and think, how can I make that better? And I do that for every wedding I shoot or anything I shoot.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Just like to add one little thing as well, because I know we're going to finish up reasonably soon. Although I am a gear lover, it's not important as long as you know how to use it. The gear is always secondary to the brain behind it and the creativity in the eye. So just learn to use any gear you've got as good as you can, and that's all you need to do.
What a quote. Is that a Ross Harvey signature quote, or...?
We can make it one.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, you know, the gear is just a tool. Nothing ever beats the consciousness behind the glass. It's your mind that makes the photo imaginative or not the gear. Which is why I've been picking up some really old school things as well, like Polaroid cameras, instant film, just so you have none of that gear giving you ability. In fact, it's taking it all away, but you can use that very, very creatively. It's good to test these things.
Yeah, definitely. No, very wise words, and thanks for saying that. Sometimes it comes across because I run this site all about gear. People lose the essence of photography, which is just what you've said. It's the person's mind, not what camera gear you're using. It's just interesting to see what tools people are using to do their jobs, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there with what you've said. I was going to ask you some tips for an aspiring photographer, but you've just covered it there. Is there anything? Is there anything that you want to add if someone's watching this and they're like, "Oh, I want to become a wedding photographer. I didn't actually realise that there was so much creativity involved in being a wedding photographer," and it's like this all-encompassing genre where you go from landscapes, macros, portraits, sports, even if they're moving around. It's just everything in one day. So if someone out there is watching, they want to become a wedding photographer, what do you think about that?
Well, you've actually just a slight diversion. You've spoken my mind entirely. Wedding photography had a bad name in the photography industry for years because people expected the same old traditional boring stuff. But what exactly as you said, you have to know so many genres of photography to succeed well in wedding photography. So if you push yourself in wedding photography, you need to learn ambient light, studio light, macro, sports, landscapes, everything you said, posing couples, which makes you a very, very experienced photographer. And I often say to people who are I don't meet them as much nowadays, but who are snooty about wedding photography, is I say that you can put a competent wedding photographer in any other genre of photography and they would do well on a commission. If you put a fashion photographer or a landscape photographer in a wedding, they would probably have a horrific nightmare. It makes you a very capable photographer, and I would say explore every avenue you can because it will make you very well-rounded. If you have a chink in your armor, something that you don't feel comfortable with, push it and push it and push it until it's your strongest. Then do that again. Find your weakest point and push it and find your strongest. Make it your strongest. And a couple of years ago, I wasn't very confident with portraits, and I thought, I need to really push this now. So I spent a whole season practicing portraits and doing more than I would feel comfortable with until I became proficient at them. And then again, I reflected on my skill set, my work, and I thought, what can I improve? And I continued to do it. And I would say that is a driving force between making all elements of your work drive up and up and up and up, so you have a high, consistent level. But the biggest thing I can ever say to someone is follow your heart, because it knows more than your mind does. And if you do something for your mind or you do it for the money, it will reflect in your work and it will reflect in your mannerisms and how you treat people. You'll call them clients, you won't see them as people, you'll see them as profit. It's paying for something you want, and it will reflect in everything you do, including your photography. If your heart is in something, put everything you have into it, because that will come through in your photography and it will come through in how you speak to people, and people will want that at their wedding, because whatever they do, because if you're willing to pay for something, you want someone who's going to give them everything, and the person who gives everything is the person that you want to help you achieve what you want. And if that's a lovely, beautiful wedding photography set of photos, then you'll find that passionate person. And be genuine to yourself and just follow your dreams, as my dad said in the note to me. Following your dreams and putting your belief in them is the key to unlocking where you want to be. Because I did a lot of research into sort of consciousness and quantum physics and NLP and philosophy, psychology, and all the big names, quote unquote, who've made it successful. They all say one thing. It's not a specific journey of X, Y, and Z to get what you want. You can go on a course and learn how someone else became successful, but it doesn't mean it will work for you. I might be going on a bit here, but the one thing they said that was consistent was belief, and it was that belief and determination that made them follow the specific path which got them to where they want to be. So just believe in yourself and push yourself, and anything is literally possible.
Oh, that's great, Ross. No, very philosophical and very, I think, that was, it was incredible. I think if I could write that out, we could put it on the back of a book and sell it.
I don't know about that. It's just musings from a mind that thinks too much, basically.
No, it's great, and I love the bit that you talked about your father and how he actually wrote that message for you, and you're repeating it, and you actually truly believe in what he said, and you're willing to put that down as one of the main reasons of your success today. I think that's awesome.
Well, they say that wisdom and intelligence are two different things. Intelligence is learned through books and someone else's experience, and it can fall like a deck of cards. For example, if you thought the world was flat, suddenly you find out it's not. Whereas wisdom comes from experience, and that's why I'm so passionate about making people understand that following your heart is actually a very, very productive thing to do, because it's worked for me and it's worked for a lot of other people I've trained and helped. And so that's what I just try and instill in people, is that belief is the key.
Yeah,
the absolute key.
Great, perfect way to end this interview. We started with a lot of gear. It was very technical in terms of cameras and lenses and so on. We didn't actually talk about lenses, but I don't think we need to. But yeah, great interview. I loved the balance at the start, like I said, with all the technical aspects, and now you're finishing it off on a philosophical note. Not just in photography, might I add. It's a way to live your life, isn't it? If you believe in yourself, blah blah blah. Anyway, I'm sounding like an American here. Us Brits are much,
blah, blah, blah.
we're more sarcastic and practical, aren't we? So yeah, I shouldn't bang on about that too much, but I'd just like to thank you very much, Ross, because you seem like a great bloke. You're very down to earth. You obviously have a hell of a lot of experience and knowledge, and on your site as well, you offer training. I'll put the link up later because I think this was just a good taster for what you offer and, like I said, your wealth of knowledge and experience. Your training, obviously, it's not free, unlike this interview, which you've very kindly done for us, and you've given us so many tips, so many specific things as well, like the names of software plugins, and like down to f-stops that you take in photos, things that photographers often guard close to their hearts. So without wanting to rabbit on too much, I just want to say a huge thank you. I know that everyone watching this is going to be so happy, and I'd love to talk to you again. So thanks for your time, Ross, and yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much for the invite. Very much enjoyed talking to you.